We talk that we think the spirituality is the part that we're missing, but we're not saying like
What is it? Oh,
what
okay, you're
is it?
you're
Yeah, yeah.
wanting to jump into the essence of it.
A
Oh,
little
this
bit,
is
a little
the
bit.
this is the part that I experience a lot, but because of, I think, my hyper rationality, sometimes I get uncomfortable to vocalize it.
Oh yeah.
Actually,
Oh yeah, definitely. I
yeah.
mean, there are times where I literally will come out of like meditation and write something down, and I'll go back later and read it, and I'm like, I can't say that to anybody. I can't really vocalize like, or I'll try to write something down and like I just can't put it into words. Like there's just no way to do it. Um,
I mean, even
but
when you talk about the experience itself, like a vision or a dream or something that you saw and came true, or it guided you to somewhere very specifically, very vividly, there are people who will be right on par with understanding what you're talking about, and there will always be majority who are just like, yeah, you're crazy.
yeah,
What
yeah,
are you talking
definitely.
about?
Yeah, exactly.
Aren't you special?
Ooh. Um, but something I think that I think Christians do understand that it is a spiritual thing because within Christianity, most Christians, I would say, who call themselves Christians, went through some sort of transformative
Revelation, this is true.
experience or revelation, and they call it their testimony. Give me your testimony. Tell me your testimony. What's your testimony? But
Oh,
what's
that's
really
what that means.
interesting, that is what that means, really. But what's interesting is that uh, if you really put it in perspective, it's kind of like me going into this organization. Let's say I am that person that's down on their luck or whatever, and living life frivolously, and I come to find that like this is not really benefiting me in any way, and self-serving is not the way to go, and I need to find some higher power, some higher authority. And they keep getting invited to church, so they go to church and they have this transformative experience, but that experience happens right before they go up and say a prayer. That
Yeah.
experience happened in order to lead them into that place where they feel like they should say that prayer or whatever prayer they're being given, or leads them into a place of like, oh, I need
Worship.
to get baptized. But we're being told that you're being baptized because that's the order of operation. We're being told that you have to say this prayer because that's the order. Oh, you're having this experience. Come to the front, and now we're going to initiate you into this thing that
What?
we're doing.
Okay, actually, what when it comes to the baptism, what are your thoughts on that thing?
I personally believe, and I won't get into it too much yet because I think that's actually going to be a full topic when we get into baptism. But I don't
Okay.
think baptism is necessarily talking about going and dunking your head in water. But I do think that the physical act of doing that can help the spiritual nature
Mark the
of it.
moment.
So I don't think that dunking your head in water is necessarily a bad thing because there is something to be said about being cleansed and being washed and coming up anew. I mean, there is something about that. Um, but I do think overwhelmingly it is again yet another spiritual experience. It is about washing away the old and bringing in the new. But I
The
don't
I
I
mean,
don't
I
think the
have a
physical act of it is what's doing that. I think there's a spiritual internal thing that's happening. But the act
mhm.
of being baptized, I guess, is a really good indicator to everyone else that like, hey, I'm turning over a new leaf. Who you knew before is a different man.
But then isn't it supposed to be your own personal thing and not to yell out to the world that much? But no, I have a friend who wholeheartedly believes that revelation is going to happen and Jesus is going to come. And if you're not baptized, even if you're a good person, even if you're a good Christian, if you're not baptized, you're going to hell. I don't feel that way at all. Actually, I've thought about this quite a bit. I was like, you know, it's just instinctively seems completely like just like any other show that I sometimes say like it's just for the show. And I don't see spirituality as ever advocating for the show. So I'm not baptized. actually, which is odd because Armenians baptize their kids the second they're born.
Hmm.
But my parents wanted to let us kind of decide on that. And even though through a lot of life journeys, I have come to a place where first very heavily rejected religion and Christianity altogether because I saw I didn't distinguish between religion and Christianity and spirituality, and then slowly became very spiritual. And I do think Christianity is actually a really good teaching, a really good moral compass. But I am still like every time I think to go get baptized, I feel like like not an imposter as in I don't deserve it. I'm not there yet spiritually. I just feel like this is the thing that Jesus would scoff at. I don't know. It's just
Yeah,
I just don't feel that it just feels like a show, like a rule to check the box. It just
yeah.
doesn't feel right.
Yeah, I mean, and it is interesting because I'm sure that once we start opening up the actual words that were being used to describe the baptism, we'll start to see that there could be a deeper, maybe more spiritual understanding of that whole process. And I think that's really um, the basis of a lot of, yeah, again, this whole like idea of like hidden knowledge. But I believe that because anywhere people always say the word of God, the word of God. And I'm like, well, which word of God are you using? If we were to call it the word of God, which
Which
translation of the
God?
word of God are
Which
we using?
God? Are we
Yeah.
mixing the new and the old?
Yeah, right. It's just like so much. I believe that when it's talking about the word of God or the logos or the first spoken sound, um, to me, it's more like a frequency.
Oh, actually, sorry. Logos. Can you explain? I hear that word a lot, and I have never looked up. So for an idiot like me who just doesn't know what logos is, what is that?
Logos would be, yeah, like the word of God.
Just
That's
that's it. They just it's just a sexier word for not
well,
saying all
it
of it.
literally means like the actual words coming from God, kind of,
I see.
right?
So it has some kind of a Latin or Greek or
Like
Hebrew meaning or
Jesus
something.
was the logos, like he was the word. So all the words that he was
Ah,
speaking were God's words, or not
got
all,
it.
but he does specifically, I think, separate when he's speaking though. But technically,
Okay.
yeah, all the words he was using, even his parables, were all the words that were coming out of his mouth were
So logos.
from
Okay.
God himself, so or herself or themselves. Uh,
Or itself.
right. So I believe though that that word of God, those words exist, and we can speak them in our time. So if I am speaking the logos, if I take that in, then and there are moments where I do feel this way, where my words are not my own. My words are being led by something more spiritual, or maybe just call it mental, or a different level of consciousness or something like that. And there are times where I actually feel that without words at all. For
Mm-hmm.
instance, I'll give you something that happened. I
Mm-hmm.
was at a rock climbing gym, and I was there by myself, and I kind of just gotten back from this like spiritual journey where I was like really focused on going. And I was just doing a lot of meditation, and a scripture came across my plate in the morning before I went that was talking where Jesus speaks about, I can't remember the exact wordage or verbiage. He says, "Consider others better than yourself." Okay. And I really took that to heart, and I was like, wow, I never really thought about that because I think about all the study I'm doing, all the research I'm doing. I have so much to give and so much to share. But it starts giving me this feeling of hierarchy where I'm like, oh, I got the knowledge, I got the know. And I decided I don't want to lead with that. I want to lead with the intention of someone knowing more can give me more. Something's greater. Someone's greater than me always. Every person that I interact
Mm-hmm.
with is greater than I.
Yeah.
And so I go to this climbing gym, I do some climbing or whatever. I didn't really speak to many people, and I come outside, and there was a couple of guys standing outside, and they were like drinking a beer, and and uh, and I decided I was going to stop and kind of chat with them a little bit and talk. And we were just kind of sitting there talking, and that feeling came over me where I was like, okay, just really consider this person as greater than you. And he starts getting into something that seems so deep and so profound when he first starts talking. And And I don't know yet, but I know now that that was my feeling that I was portraying to him. And he suddenly started to realize the ridiculousness of his words. Like he was going to a place that didn't really make sense. It was very nonsensical. But he started from a place of like really wanting to maybe give something. And what I realized was is that like me removing myself, right, allowed for something more honest and truthful to be in that presence. Because I opened up the door for him to be the greatest in that moment, and he hasn't done the work to be there. That's what I felt, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And he couldn't arrive there. He couldn't get there because, you know, but it was me giving him that platform that allowed the opportunity. So it takes all of us to kind of do this, where it's like when I'm having a conversation with you, I want to consider that what you're going to bring to the table is of great value and
Mm-hmm.
you know much make vastly different than my contributions because we're just very different
Different
people coming
people.
from very different places. Um, but it's really nice to see someone just like constantly seeking and digging and just like not letting it go and just like really I want to know what's going on. You know, it's like that's such a good quality, I
Yeah.
think. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I have interesting thoughts, or it stirred interesting thoughts that when you think about you, in a way, you were describing humility, right, which is such an important thing. And it's something I think that humans always struggle, like especially if someone starts praising you, giving you all these compliments. It's really hard not to just for a second just let that go to your head. But then I think this is where for me detachment works really well. But I've detached to a degree where I cannot get reattached ever. you know and that has its negatives too, because I sometimes don't sense certain emotions at all. Like the only times I might sense a certain emotion if it's too intense, right? Let's say intense level of happiness, which happens very rarely, then I might jump into the first perspective and feel that from Naira's perspective, rather than always observing Naira from this third perspective, detached view. Similarly, when it's high, like a moment of high frustration, I might feel that, but overall, I just feel quite detached from the self entirely, and I think it's it is interesting how humility plays into all of that, because oh man, I don't have it well organized in my head actually to go there. Yeah, I don't have it
Mm-hmm.
well organized to go there, but I think it is important to view people like they have something greater to offer and have that humility, and all of a sudden, even if what they said isn't of value, you will actually observe a valuable human behavior, perhaps, or something. But it is definitely always important not to think you're better than anyone or allow people to act like they're better than you.
Right, right. Yeah. I mean, I don't really mind if someone, you know, has a big chip on their shoulder and they have a bunch of information, but it is fun for me whenever I hear someone so confident about something and then I just have like a little bit of information that disrupts all of that. I do like that feeling a little bit where I'm just like, hey, come back down here. You went way up there for a minute. You got to step down, you know, because
Yeah,
nobody has all the answers. No one has all the knowledge,
yeah.
you know, or we all
Actually,
do, maybe.
yeah, maybe within. Actually, that's what I remembered. Actually, what I was going to say. I think that silence that I was talking about in nature, I have to say that was the most humbling of experiences, and I can't like explain why that was, but it had to do with the power of the nature over you, and feeling all of a sudden realizing how little you know, and what a small, not small in a bad, like I don't like when people think like, oh, you should feel small to feel it's the right thing. No, it's just you feel your correct spot in that nature. You're an element there, but you're not greater than, because there's just this massive universe that's just so vast, and it's fascinating to experience that. It's similar to when, let's say, an exceptional thunder just roars in the sky, when it's just so loud that you just, like if you lived in a climate that you've never experienced that, and then you go into a climate where the clouds just roar, it is just such a magical, majestic, for some people, scary thing. And similar to if you go up, like when I was in Goat Rock Wilderness in Washington, and I'm hiking through this. It was a 22-mile hike, and I'm going through, and every now and then this vast beauty would just open in front of me, where it would just bring me almost to my knees, like hypothetically, like it just, the feeling was like that, because it's just so grand and it's so beyond words and ability to capture on a camera, or just that beauty and that massiveness. It's just like, it is the ultimate humbling thing.
Hmm.
And I think this is
Yeah.
probably why we're so detached from real spirituality, because we are piled up in urban cities, living this rat race, working 9 to 5, paying the bills and the stress and all this stuff, and we don't get to really experience nature anymore. We don't even know what real food is, how it
Hmm.
comes
Hmm.
about.
Yeah, and I think that's a very interesting point you brought up. Is about just like when you go into meditation, um, about feeling small but not necessarily insignificant. I
Yes.
think that's really what it is. You actually feel very significant in the grand scheme of it all. Like you experiencing and being aware of the beauty in nature makes you very significant. Like you're one of
Yeah.
someone who is being aware. What's
You're an
interesting is
element that has a purpose.
right, there are two things that I get in meditation, and the second one only much later in my life. But in the beginning, when I used to meditate a lot, I would have that same thing where it's just like, wow, I just feel like there's so much, like all the knowledge that's out there. Like I know like a fraction of all this knowledge, all this wisdom, all this history, and then like even the history that I know, like how real is it, and just like feeling like this in meditation, like almost overwhelmed, but then suddenly getting like a small like yeah, but then there's this, where it's like, oh, okay, it brings you back into that realm of significance. But then on the other hand, uh, I've truly felt, that I'm going to try to put it into words, but it's very difficult. But it's that idea of like maybe becoming like one with nature, but
Hmm.
becoming like a creator, becoming um, understanding that we do have power and authority and all these things through meditation. There are times in that place where, man, there are times when I come out of meditation where I just feel like, oh, the best. I'm going to give you a secret here of mine that I think is very, very gold to me. Um, in my living room, we have like a small gap in the door. And so when the wind gets really strong, it creates these really cool, like sounds, like these really cool whirling sounds. And if I sit there on the couch and it's really windy in the morning and I go into meditation, then wow, it takes me through quite the journey of just feeling something really incredible. It's almost like I'm being spoken to by nature, and because I can't control the sounds that are happening, they're not. There's no rhythm to it, So
Okay.
it's not anticipated. None of the sounds are anticipated.
Okay.
They're all very just random and
Random.
chaotic, but yet so beautiful. I mean, there are times I used to do this actually when I lived in another place. It was like in the city. I would go into this place of meditation, and we lived underneath an overpass, a highway overpass. So the sounds that would come out of this would just like echo and bellow, and there would be moments where I'm like, I would suddenly like feel or like see, or like I was being told something, and then suddenly it was like this sound of like this truck, pull using the Jake brake, and it's just like blah, like coming through the tunnel, and it would just be like this at the exact moment where I needed that exact sound, and it just really made me feel so connected to it all, like as if I was one with it all, and I think
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of where I think we can all kind of get to that place of mastery, so to speak, maybe communicate with each other.
Yeah, I think one thing you said there that stood out to me is when people Kind of like when you say you just read history, or more you research, and then there's just so much information that you start for a second just feeling like it's just overwhelming amount. You just feel like you know nothing, right? Which is true. More you learn, less you know is a thing. But I also think there's a culture that is constantly pushing towards you shouldn't say something unless you're an expert of something, and I think nobody's an expert of anything. Like, it's my view that nobody's an expert. Like, you can learn and study whatever you want, you will never know everything to begin with. And two, some of the best, most valuable information that I've stumbled upon has been literally in meditation. And when I say meditation, I'm talking about just living, allowing that silence, focusing on your particular that element that takes you there. For me, it's like building or gardening. That does take me there. And my entire life, I rejected wanting to study and learn. Up until 13 years old, I was reading a lot because I was curious about certain things, but then I just dumped it. And for up till the last, I don't know, 10 years, I started picking back up to read. Otherwise, all that my youth, I allowed myself to get to places, and not consciously. I didn't consciously set out to do this and get here. But what was interesting is, for example, when I first time learned the word stoicism, that was really fascinating to me, because my entire life I had created a framework. I had reinvented stoicism internally without knowing anything about stoicism. I had created a framework of what it takes for me to be accountable, to be honest with myself, to make sure I stand my ground, to make sure that when people treat me a certain way, I am able to forgive them, but also just detach and just go upon your way, not allow emotion to take over me. So I've always just tried to basically practice and these values to be a grounded human being that I think I would respect. So I created an image of what is the person, what is that Naira that I will respect, and I was working towards that. And then it was one day I was talking to someone, and then I just kind of went into the details of what are my focuses, what I'm working on. And then he was just like, "Oh, so you're an aspiring stoic." And I was like, I don't know what that means. And then he just introduced me to this concept of stoicism, and then I did a little research. I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Very interesting. But I think it is much more valuable, though, far more valuable, to do this on your own. How did stoicism come about? Someone started observing and putting down what works best, what seems to be the higher ground, and then started practicing, and then thought value in it and wanted to just spread the word, right? So now if you just read that, it's I think it's a lot less, it's harder to really connect and go about practicing it when you're not allowing that silence to come to it on your own, rather than you're just reading someone else telling you what to do. It's just never going to be the same, I think.
I agree with that. I think that a lot of my uh, revelations came before I knew what it meant. And then after
Yeah.
knowing what it means, it kind of a little bit diminishes it, I guess. But we just have to understand that we live in a historical time where very little has not been done or experienced. Um, and so, yeah, you probably had this feeling of like, oh, I'm reinventing the wheel. And then you realize, no, this was reinvented thousands of years ago. And here I am, rediscovering
Coming to
something
the
like that.
same.
Right,
And
which
it's
is
and it's
fantastic. Yeah.
fine, but it's not insignificant. You can view it, you can choose to view it in a way where the first time you, maybe the first couple of times it happens, and you're thinking, oh well, will I ever stumble upon something of my own or new? But
Right.
then you come to a place where it's like, I don't actually need to. All I'm getting is a validation of great wisdom that somehow on my own, with my young brain, well, not so young anymore, but back then, I was able to observe and step on the right path. And now I'm learning that this is some great wisdom. For me, that's actually becomes a compliment and almost a validation that
For
I am
sure.
on the right track, instead of thinking, oh man, damn it. It's not like that at all. It's just it's humbling. It's
Yeah.
humbling, but to recognize that, yeah, we technically just always cycle through,
Correct. Yeah. Well,
always.
and that's it. That also gets me into this idea of, have you ever heard the term akashic or akashic?
Akashic records, yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Oh,
So it's
I feel
very
like we can
similar.
do that separately on its own. That's
That's
just
fine. That's
such a
fine. But yeah, it's
fascinating
that
topic.
it's that idea that knowledge exists out there already.
Yeah.
Like imagine knowledge itself or wisdom itself. It's there. It's established, and it's something that we can just literally tap into. So then we become all knowing, right? We become that in those moments where we're attached to it or connected to it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the issue is the amount of time that it takes to know everything would be impossible. So it's really important that we seek what is really important to us. Like those
To
things are
connect to that data. It's actually interesting when people say instinct or gut feeling.
mhm,
Um, to
intuition.
me, intuition. To me, that is they oftentimes they will dismiss it almost as if it's a feeling, right? Ah, it's just a feeling. It's not based on facts. To me, it is. If you're a highly intuitive person, it is the most factual thing. Except you might not be able to call out the source, because what is an intuition or a gut feeling? I think it's a database. It is like you go about your life, you observe world, and you store. If your brain works, you analyze everything and store it, whether you're conscious or subconscious. Your brain is, seeing things, and it's packaging it into other parallels, or if there are lines to connect, is connecting the dots, and then it's taking this observation and storing it. You might not be able to 10 years from now say something that you had observed 10 years ago and be able to say exactly when and where, but it is a record that you have stored, and you can access it. So it becomes this gut feeling, but it's not really a feeling if you're a conscious observer of the universe. If you're observing the world constantly and wanting to make sense, you're a curious soul, then your instinct is nothing short of actual data, in my opinion. Because sometimes you can just be highly accurate about something. You can pull that out. You say, this is how it is. You can be sure of it. People can call you crazy for years until scientifically gets proven. And then now you're like, yeah, that's what I was talking about.
Yeah,
And
I
yeah.
have a similar experience in that. I'm sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, but
No, no.
um, yeah, I mean, I remember once I was like 10 to 12 years old, not really thinking about anything in life and why it matters. I just was like being a child. And someone asked the question, how come I only get sunburn in the middle of the day? Right? How come I only get
Uh-huh.
sunburn in the middle of the day? And my immediate answer, I just thought about it for just like a second or two. And immediately the answer comes to me, which is like, oh, yeah, because at the end of the day, the sun has so much more atmosphere to travel through to get to you that it's just being blocked. I had no idea what I was talking about. I was just saying things that I could, I guess, like kind of observe. I just remember realizing that was correct at one point and just being like, huh, where did I get that answer from? There was something else about an airplane once that I just randomly spit out what I thought was reality, and it just so happened to be. And I'm sure I've been wrong in a lot of cases, but I think there are times where we just are able to just like tap into it. The question alone brings about the answer. There was an experience that I had. I used to work in New York in Union Square. I don't know if you did. I meet you when I worked at Paragon Sports?
I don't know. I know you were in New York, and all I remembered you as at the time, because we only hung out a couple times maybe,
Right.
and all I remembered was we actually our conversations would flow. We definitely had a lot of like we would talk a lot, and then rock climbing. I just remember you were a rock climber. Like that was just like the identifying, defining Bobby thing.
Good,
Rock
good. I like
climbing.
that. I like rock climbing is a great one. Um, but when I worked at this place called Paragon Sports, there was a group of warehouse managers, and the director of the warehouse decided he wanted to give us all this thing called the Japanese River Test.
Okay.
Okay. And what it is there's a group of different characters on one side of the river, and you have to get them across. You can take, I think, two in this. It's kind of like the fox and chicken and
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
the whatever the other item is. It's very similar to that, but it's way more complicated and complex. And what's interesting is the first person they gave it to, he took just over an hour, and in order to make it into this corporate realm in Japan, they were given this test. You had to complete it within under an hour, and then you get in. Then you get to the next level or whatever. I can't remember exactly how it goes. I could be way off, but something like this. And then the next person they gave it to did it at a little less time. And the next person, and I happened to be the last person, and I got it in the fastest time. And 8 minutes, not to brag, but but I remember I was actually sitting in the office with another manager who had already taken the test. And obviously he wants to win, right? But every time I was vocalizing as I'm going through it, they're like, I don't understand. Like, I can't get through this. I got this. And I wasn't even saying what I got. I mean, I can't get past this. But in his mind, he knows about approximately how long it's taken me to get to that point. So he realizes I'm probably at the first part where it's stumped. And so he's already calculating and configuring this right in front of me in his own mind. And it was like right after I would say that, I would see it.
Yeah.
And so in fact, I'm almost certain that he was giving me the answer. Now I'm certain of
Interesting.
that. At the time, I was just like, I'm a genius, whatever. But but later, it's like I realized that like no, that answer was existing within that ether, within that space that we were both in, and me doing those simple things or calculating the current problem within that um, the whole problem. He was feeling what I was feeling, and he was giving me the answer. So
I mean, there
thank
could
you,
be
Yuli.
there could be also subconscious like cues or facial express small things that you were receiving from him that was giving you the answer. That could be also like a rational explanation too. But
I
yeah,
think
I
it's
mean,
really just because I'm a genius, but
oh, okay. I
I
mean,
mean,
that's. I mean, that must be. Sometimes that's just the easiest answer. Um, but the Akashic record thing is very interesting to me. But this is very different, and I think we can get into it one day, like as a topic of its own, to talk about the reincarnation theories of other cultures that they believe so heavily. I find it fascinating. But that Akashic record plays into it because it's not just a record of the world's knowledge, but also supposed to be, I think, your past lives and past souls, like
with
journeys you've
all
gone through.
knowledge,
It's all knowledge. So
right?
if your soul has been repurposed and reborn again, kind of like a computer code, you can reprogram and then just send it off. Repackage it, and it becomes really interesting. Like you can get into really fun concepts with that because then how I sometimes look back things that I like wrote down when I was in my like early 20s, or
Mm-hmm.
I meet a person that I haven't seen since then and they say, "Oh, you're like remember you said this to me." And I'm like, "That sounds oddly wise for a for a 20-year-old," and I don't even remember saying such things, but it's just like how would I know, like how did I know those things, right? Like sometimes I might say something that I have no clue how and why do I know, but I am so sure that I am actually speaking, I'm not speaking out of turn, and time will pass and it will prove me that I wasn't speaking out of turn. It's an instinct. It's a bizarre connection to some answers. And sometimes when I think, I can rationally link back to how it could have been because maybe my life has taken me through that before, or I've come across people who maybe were through that before. But there are times when it's just so out of my path that I'm just like, how do I know this so well when I've never been, let's say, a doctor before? Or haven't been a
Right,
doctor,
right.
or something specific, you know.
Mm-hmm.
It is fascinating. It is fascinating. But I don't know if we stirred off a little bit from spirituality and what it is incest. But I guess no. I guess we are describing the experiences of that.
Right. Like there's a spiritual realm, there's another place. And I think that's what it means, like even in the scriptures where it's talking about there's a scripture in the Old Testament, for we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities and rulers of darkness and evil wickedness in high places. Something like this, something along those lines. Um, but it's interesting when you start dissecting again the root of the word and what they actually mean. It's a lot of like invisible things of invisible nature.
Yeah.
Um, and I also, this is going to get into something very modern and current. I believe that a lot of things that are of invisible nature, we are actually being bombarded with a lot of different frequency waves, a lot of different um,
Like
frequency
man-made, you mean?
patterns, and yeah, man-made stuff. And you know, because we all have Wi-Fi routers, we all have cell phone signal, we all have radio towers, and you know, Bluetooth and all these things, and like all of these are like invisible forces that are technically influencing us in some way, maybe that we don't fully understand. And
Uh,
I do believe that that's kind of along the similar lines of just like we forget that there is a very spiritual place and a very
do you mean those
invisible
frequencies are
realm.
perhaps blocking the good connection? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, possibly. I don't think it's possible to
Possibly.
block. I think it's more about creating distortion.
The noise,
Right,
chaos.
exactly. And I think we can easily step outside of that. I mean, I turn my Wi-Fi router off when I'm not using it. I don't let the Wi-Fi router run. I do keep the modem connected, you know, the hard line because it does weird things if I don't. But that constant broadcasting, I don't think I necessarily want. I usually try to keep my Bluetooths off and stuff like that. I never use Bluetooth headphones really,
That's
even though I'm
very
using them right now. But
interesting.
but
That's
yeah,
very
because
interesting.
I'm very concerned with how it might influence things
Hmm.
uh, because I think yeah, if we can transmit and receive frequency signals and stuff like that, I think we have to be very cautious. In fact, I once came across a study, and I cannot quote it. I don't know where it's from, so I apologize if this is like just like some false information I'm about to spew out right now. But um,
You
there
can
was a
call it, yeah,
there was a study done
memory.
about the Wi-Fi, the actual Wi-Fi router, and the frequency that it gives off.
Hmm.
And it was actually, I think I came across this information in two different places. I'd seen this before, the Wi-Fi frequency. I'd remembered that, and then I was looking at something that was talking about the frequencies of the heart. The actual heart has specific frequencies, and they were
Okay.
very similar. They were very closely related. So who cares, right? Doesn't matter. Whatever. Doesn't matter. Well, then my mom starts talking to me about having like sleep apnea. She was having all these sleep issues, and her heart would race, and she would stop breathing, and you know, certain things like this. And I didn't know exactly what that was about, and for some reason, I just got this feeling that it like has a lot to do with that Wi-Fi router. And I was like, okay, whatever, you know, but I couldn't shake the feeling. So I went back and started looking, and what I realized is that the same symptoms that she was having were given by many diagnoses, but I was able to make a correlation with people with sleep apnea who spend a lot of time at home. And what I discovered from that is, let's say that that Wi-Fi router is somehow um, distorting my own heart frequency, right? Well, if I'm only
Hmm.
there for a very specific time, my heart always has time to recover. I step outside of that and then I come back into it or whatever. My heart understands this, there's a difference. But if I'm remaining in that space, then my heart might slowly want to try to pick up that other frequency because it's close enough, it's similar enough, and forget its own frequency, causing all sorts of distorted problems. But that's because my mom isn't working, so she's at home, and you know the Wi-Fi router's always on. But some people
That's
have
very
experienced
interesting.
this who also like work from home. People who work from home, a lot of times they're constantly being bombarded with that other signal, that other frequency. And it could be nothing. I may have just made this
Hey, hey,
connection for no reason,
it
but
could be, the variables could be endless, because I don't find it strange that it connects to people who spend a lot of times at home. I
mm,
actually can think of multiple people right now in my head. I'm not going to name them, that I think they have sleep apnea, and they all are at home all the time. Like they
hmm
don't really do anything with nature whatsoever. And then if they're at work, it's still highly like a type of work that also has that depressing, setup. And I think it could be multiple things. It could be something like that, that what you're thinking of. It could be combination of many elements, including the fact that you don't see sun,
yeah,
like
yeah.
you don't get the life, the vitamin D, the you don't get connected to nature at all.
So
And
you're saying we should worship the sun?
hey, why not? I worship the sun. Well, not worship, but I love the sun. It is actually fascinating when just the right now in Tennessee, it was I'm starting to feel the spring, the breath of spring, and it just comes with the sun being a little bit warmer, a bit closer, and it's just like I wake up and I'm like ready to take over the world. It's just like a complete different feeling. But to get back to what you were saying about the frequencies, it is actually interesting, because I don't know. I haven't done a lot of research of understanding how exactly the cell towers work versus internet, but I think there's a huge difference probably. I'm just assuming. And when I was in the forest, I actually didn't have internet other than a bootleg version that I had created. Well, my brother had helped me to make a router falsely think that I'm receiving an internet connection, but it was actually using a cell tower. So I was not getting any actual internet waves, but I was able to have just about two, like I think it never went more than 5 megabits of power as far as connectivity, but I was able to do minor things, and be able to even have a meeting like this, for example. So it is interesting because it was also, I was in nature and I was completely detoxed from most things, even though I still had a phone, let's say, but I had no connection. It was one line, one bar that, let's say, if I cannot even make a phone call, but through this bootleg version of this internet, I was able to make a phone call. But overall, just the connectivity was so low. It is interesting. Actually,
Yeah.
and someone who had insomnia her entire life, I started sleeping very well. Everything just fell into its place. Just I was at peace
Yeah,
overall.
that's fantastic.
But
Well,
yeah, it could be a million variables, but it's an interesting one.
yeah. Well, I mean, the thing is that I mean, 5G itself, 5G. I mean, wow, getting into G in the Gemo and well, but yeah, 5G. The towers are classified, I think, within the military industrial complex as a weapon. Um, I mean,
Hmm.
they can be used as a, they can certainly be used as a weapon. They can give off specific types of frequencies of various things. I once
If
read
you
an
can
article.
find anything on that, I would want to see it because.
I wonder if you can help me find something. I read something once, and I distinctively remember reading this. It was like in the USA Today or some other news article, New York Times or something
Hmm.
like that, where it specifically said that AT&T would be using because there was like some event happening that they were worried about. An uprising or some sort of chaos within a protest. I remember it had something to
Hmm.
do with a protest. They said AT&T will be using their towers to control or to calm the crowds. It was like written in the article. It says U.S. and I was
Huh.
like, what does that mean? I was like asking people as I'm reading it. I'm like, what does this mean? And they're like, I don't know what that means. I'm like, are they able to send out a signal that like kind of suppresses your anger or something? I don't even know what. And I wonder if that isn't even
I
is
would
a form
have
of
to.
technology that's able to be used. I mean,
I would have to see and read the details to see what the heck are they trying to say. Because as of now, like if I talk to people who like hardcore are into artificial intelligence and this new infrastructure that we're building, they will make a very good case that 5G is nothing to worry about. But I don't. I think I. Well, I think it's false. Something as powerful as the world we're building cannot be without repercussions.
right.
And I might not be able to explain. I'm not a tech nerd to understand exactly what that entails and how we are getting these frequencies and how are we getting instant information from across the globe to here. Like it just all feels magical. Imagine like if we didn't grow up with this and somebody brings this to you and they would immediately become gods, right? Like
Right, right,
it's
right,
just
right.
like, what are you talking about?
Yeah, I think that these things are all somewhat important. But yeah, I don't. I have an overwhelming feeling about things, but I like to present the ideas that um, I don't think that these things are created in order to try to kill us necessarily. I do think that there are some things that maybe are useful in keeping us a little bit more docile as a humanity, as as a citizen of a country. I think there are certain informations that would create chaos and disorder and uprising. So I think that there are ways that we you know but I don't think someone created medicine because they felt like the drugs were going to eventually cause harm to people. I think they were specifically trying to cure something, but directly interacting, or what's the better word is,
I mean, nature takes
intervening.
its course. Nature takes
Yeah,
its course. So
like
I
we're
think it's
intervening in a way that we don't truly understand, like what does that actually mean. So here we are giving this medication, but then later on we find out, oh, that medication actually caused cancer in this person because their body couldn't process whatever
yeah.
medication they were being given. But I don't think the person giving the medication was like, oh yeah, this could kill somebody. But I do believe that because there's a financial gain there, I think it does blur a lot
End
of.
up taking the negative turn.
Right.
I think we have a very good saying for that. The road to hell is paved with good intentions.
Hmm.
But it is a I think I personally think it is a multi-layer thing. So yes, you first invent something because you see a problem and you want to solve that problem. But then you see the power of that thing, then forces come in wanting to exploit it, just like everything else. And driven by money, by greed, by control, including by some bad intentions. Because right now when I look at the pharmaceutical industry, there's no way. Yes, it has. Let's say if you take from 1900s, 1800s, obviously it didn't start right away like let's just do this so that today we're here. However, at some point, pretty quickly on, it took the negative path and has become more and more nefarious since then, knowingly, consciously, right? Because it doesn't start conscious, but then it becomes conscious, I think. Because there's no reason why, without any tests, you take a poison, a chemical you just created in a lab that you have never tested whether it's safe to consume, haven't done any long-term studies on that. You just immediately lobby to make it into a food preservative, and you don't even bother to call it safe. You just call it generally recognized as safe grass. And and then when you look at those compounds today, we know that they harm people. Nobody has a normal functioning gut anymore, literally.
Hmm.
Everybody has digestive issues. People are sick. People are sick with autoimmune disorders, a disorder that literally, this is all it is. We don't know what it is. Your body's attacking itself. So here's a pill. Okay, if you don't know what it is, what pill am I taking? Why am I taking a pill if you don't know what it is? So it is extremely corrupt and it has become nefarious. And then other people who do want to control the world, then they do their part, right? They're like, we could maybe make all the kids to be on these drugs from early on, ADHD and whatever, and just turn them into disobedient, nice little citizens. So it's just not that it just everything is perfectly crafted to get us here, but people do jump in and start crafting their own narratives, and if they're successful, nefarious plans and paths take place, and this is how we end up here.
Yeah, I mean
It's
we've seen that. I mean we've seen it, like
yeah.
crude medical research is what I like to call it. It's just like we've seen this in our past, and we see it in we're at this point in Western medicine where we treat like the toxin or the poison in within the water, but we don't treat the water itself, and
Yeah,
that's kind
yeah,
of how I
which
feel.
we do the same with the body.
That's what I mean. Exactly
Yeah.
that, where it's like we have a toxin inside of us, so we give a chemical to try to kill that toxin, but not realizing that that chemical is also
No,
unnatural. It
no,
doesn't
we
belong
we
inside the
actually
body.
give the medicine drug to not kill that toxin, because that would resolve the issue, to suppress you from feeling it.
Yes, well, a lot of times that's what happens. But I think that, most doctors prescribing something, they go to school for medicine now. Most doctors get less
They're
than,
clueless.
I definitely say it's less than 20 hours of dietary. I don't know exactly how much it is, but I would be safe to say you go through your whole medical
Well, and you
school
can
and you
take a
spend less
look.
than 20 hours in dietary.
And you can
And
take a look how much money Pfizer has given to curriculums.
yeah, and no one says to their kids like, "Oh, okay, your kid has ADHD. Well, how much red dye 40 are they consuming in their diet?" Like they don't a
Or what
doctor
are
doesn't
they
ask
eating?
that
Yeah,
question. They don't ask that question. And that's the problem is they say, "Oh, you have ADHD? Well, here is the prescription to fix that."
to
And
calm you down.
right. And the reason why that happens though, and I can actually explain this a little bit to where it's like very easy for people to understand. It has a lot to do with medical billing, medical coding,
Yeah,
and the insurance companies. If I
yeah.
come to you as a sick individual, you're my doctor, and I say to you, I have ADHD, and you tell me stop eating red dye 40, you cannot bill me for that.
Yeah.
So then what was that visit about? And let's say that I go home and I keep eating red dye 40. I could say, I could sue the hospital and say, hey, I went to this doctor, right? He told me whatever, right? I didn't listen to him. It doesn't matter, right? But he didn't give me anything to help remedy this or solve this. And the problem is that because when I've had talks with doctors, people in the medical industry about this, they 100% agree with this. They're like, a lot of it
Yeah.
is outside of my control. And the main reason why is because if I say to that person, stop eating red dye 40, and they don't, then I've done nothing, right? I've given them the best advice, but I've really done nothing. If I tell them they need to exercise, but I'm not giving them a prescription for exercise, right? I'm not writing anything. I can't code any of that. And the main problem is that if somebody comes to me and says, "Hey, you know what? I want to keep eating Doritos. I know it's got red dye 40, but I want it. So can you give me a medication that helps me be able to live the life that I want to live?"
Eating
And they
poison.
yeah, there you go. Yeah, we'll just give you this other thing that causes, kidney disease or whatever it is, right? So you'll deal with that later on
Oh
in life. But
man.
that's fine because you got to eat your Doritos. Super
Yeah.
important. Nacho cheese, baby.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I think it's funny. It's I can actually tie this back to spirituality before we end this episode, because it is even more noise constantly in our lives to completely detach ourselves from thinking. The amount of I wish people understood, like sometimes I just the reason why I have this dream to create a self-sustaining retreat is because I want people who are want to help themselves, but they don't know how. Because I know people like that. They would do anything, but they're so detached from reality, from real food, and it's also so bad that it's easy for someone to say, okay, don't eat anything in packagings, but then we're assuming that our red meat on the in the shelves is healthy, or our vegetables are healthy, but our vegetables are coated with God knows what, and it tastes like it tastes like cardboard. It doesn't taste like anything like what it's supposed to taste like. And then your red meat is sprayed with lactic acid, where all the nutrients are stripped for it to just live forever on the shelf. And if it's spoiled, you're not even going to be able to smell it. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so it blocks the odor. And all of this is like, I can actually right now just pull out the PDFs of the lab test of this, because I've gone the rabbit hole on this one. And then people are eating supposedly healthy diets, and they're like, I still cannot fix myself. What's going on? And they're frustrated, and rightfully so. Like, I would love to have this retreat that is 100% pure self-sustaining ingredients, nothing altered, nothing chemically ridden, that people can come and start learning what real nutrition tastes like to begin with, what real tomato smells like, for example, and then start reconnecting with that reality and seeing how they feel. Because it's just so sad when I see what's happening, and doctors are complacent or jaded or completely clueless. They don't know because that's what they've been taught. And very few are courageous enough to just be like, I am not going to kill people, because I can see that I am not doing the whole code of do no harm. That's not what I'm doing. So I'm going to stop, not care about the insurance company, open my own private clinic, put some reasonable fees that can sustain me in business and also I can help people. There's very few in between. But then they get mocked as if they're not real doctors. The good old you are what you eat and just eat right and exercise sounds so simple. But if you do that, it also will just open up all those paths to connect with spirituality because the chemicals your brain starts producing because you're feeling healthy, you're feeling well, the endorphins and everything is just an amazing feeling that so many people miss out on.